Hi, friends. So, this week I wanted to try out a couple of kind of weird craft supplies that I've had sitting around for a while and I've never tried them before. I have this wood burning paste and this scorch marker. They essentially do the same thing. You put them on wood and use a heat gun like this one and blow on them, and it should burn the wood like a wood burning tool. I did a wood burning project once before, but I actually gave that wood burner away, and I burned myself in the process, so I want to try these. These are all of the instructions on the box. Sand to 220 grit, stick the pattern and paint the gel on, and heat using a heat gun. The pen has even less description. Prep, shake, apply, heat, move, whatever that means. Watch and finish. I don't know what move means. Do I wave it around? The first one I'm going to test is the wood burning paste. Inside we have a little brush, slightly more detailed instructions, a scraper, 2 little templates. That giraffe is so cute. And then this is the paste. Ew, it's like orangey jello. I'm going to use this old piece of birch plywood just for testing. The instructions say to sand the wood to 220 grit, but I'm not exactly sure what that means. Does that mean I want it 220 grit or rougher? Or does that mean I wanted it 220 grit and smoother? So I'm just not going to sand it at all. I'm going to start with this rose stencil because it's less cute. And I don't know if these are reusable. But I hope that they are. Ew. Blah. Orange boogers. I'm going to use the scraper to scrape some gel onto the stencil. And then the directions say to use a paper to absorb the excess paste. I'm going to use a paper towel because I don't know why I would use a paper. It's weird. Then I remove the stencil, or tear it off according to the instructions, and put everything really far away because I don't know what'll happen. On my heat gun, I'm going to start with the lower of the 2 settings. I'm not sure if it's less heat or just slower air, quite honestly, but it's quieter, so there's that. After a full minute, nothing was happening, so I turned it to the higher setting. And then finally, I could see it working. There's a dark area around the rose, and I didn't get it all the way burned in a couple of places. I'm not sure if the dark area is from the stencil and I got paste there, or if I actually burned the wood. So I'm going to try putting paste on with the brush and see if that makes a difference. Surprisingly, this gel paste paints on pretty well, and you can get pretty fine details. I don't know why I made an A. I just wanted to, I guess. Okay, so obviously that's the wood burning and not the gel accidentally getting on there. So I'm going to try one more time and use the lower heat setting and hold it on there for longer to see if I can burn the design, but not the wood around it. For reference, this took about 2.5 minutes to even start to change color and about 6.5 minutes to fully darken. It did burn less of the wood around it this time though. From far away, it looks pretty good, but when you get up close, you can see that it didn't actually burn as dark as the others. So I'm curious if you can do a second coat and darken it. I'm not actually sure if it's the wood that's burning or if it's just the gel on top of the wood burning. I can smell wood burning, but is that the wood under the gel or is that the wood around it that I'm accidentally burning? So many questions. Okay, next let's try this pen. First I'll shake it up like the directions say. The pen has 2 different tips. On one side there's a bullet tip, which we're gonna prime. I don't know how you know when it's coming out. Am I going to be able to see it? I have no idea. Oh, yes, I can. It's coming out, whatever it is. This isn't orange like the gel, it's clear and watery. I'm just gonna write my name. The other side of the pen is a little triangle sponge. I'll just test it out. Can I get a skinny line? Boop. Yeah. Boop. I'm gonna try the lowest heat setting this time so I don't burn the wood as much. Whatever this liquid is, it started to change color in about 15 seconds and was fully darkened after about a minute. It is a little bit lighter than the gel. I'm not sure that you can see it on camera, but I can see it in person. I'm going to try a second pass with the pen and sponge and then heat it again to see if it will darken. Again, not sure. But there is this like white whatever. I'm not sure what that is. The last thing that I want to test is how well it will cover a sketch, because I want to be able to sketch something out before I go over it with the gel or the pen. And I'm going to try two different kinds of pencils. A regular mechanical pencil with normal lead to see if the burned wood will darken enough for it not to be noticeable, and a watercolor pencil, because I'm kind of thinking maybe it will dissolve with the wet gel and pen going over it, so it'll only leave the medium that's going to be scorched. And I'm going to test out both the gel and the pen on each. I know you can't really see what I'm drawing with the watercolor pencil, but it is there. The Scorch Gel paints on surprisingly easy in these detailed areas. I could see how you could get a really detailed design with a tiny brush. But when it goes over the watercolor pencil, I can still see the drawing through the gel, so I'm not sure that's actually good. The pen is a little harder to draw very detailed areas. This bullet nib is pretty fat, and the little sponge is harder to maneuver for drawing. The watercolor pencil isn't dissolving under the pen either. Let's burn them. Over the regular pencil, the gel darkened in about the same amount of time, but the pen took a little bit longer. Both mediums really didn't seem to want to burn over the watercolor pencil, even with the highest setting. And you can still see the watercolor pencil through even after burning, where you can't see the regular pencil at all. So I guess regular pencil is the way to go. But I actually came up with a couple of more tests that I want to do. First, I'm going to rub some water over the burned areas to see if anything comes off. I just wanted to see if it's just the burned gel sitting on the wood surface. The other thing that I want to do is see if I sand the wood with a gentle sandpaper, if the discolored spots around the design will come off. It kind of looks like it's just spreading it around. I tried wiping it off with watercolor to see if that would help, but even after it dried, it still looks dark, so sanding didn't really actually do any good. I did try sanding the rows a little bit more, but not only can you still see the discoloration around the edge, but the actual burned picture is now lighter. So I'm going to try this one more time to keep the heat gun on for a shorter burst and move it around a lot. I basically held it for about a count of 5 in my head and then moved it. I felt like that worked pretty well, so I tried it one more time and then again with the gel. And in person, it looks good, but on camera, I can definitely still see discoloration. So I don't know what those tests accomplished. I'm gonna move on to actually trying to make art with this. I want to see first how well it works when you're burning large areas. Like, how long does it take? Can I get an even burn? So I'm using this giant wooden heart. I have no idea what this is made out of besides wood. I did sand this down, and because I want to burn a lot of area, I'm going to go with a space theme so that the background is all burned. I'm just drawing a bunch of planets and stars and a rocket, and just filling all of the space in with a ton of tiny little circles. I did use stencils for this because I can't draw an even star to save my life, and I didn't want to add extra stress to something I already wasn't sure that was going to work. After the sketch, it's a lot, so I'm trying to decide if I want to use the pen because it's obviously faster, but if I use the gel, I'll be able to see where I've painted and where I haven't. Plus, it's more exact if I use a little tiny brush. I decided to go with the gel and a tiny brush, and an hour and 15 minutes later, it's all gelled up. Most of it is dry, but I did make sure to dab any excess off. Burning this took a while. I used the highest heat setting and it still didn't even start to change color for about 8 minutes. It took almost a half hour total of heating. I know that you don't have to burn it all the way to this black color, but I actually like that color better, and I don't really know how to get it even without going as dark as possible. It is looking kind of ashy, I guess, like there's some white spots on it. I really want to sand that off, but I'm kind of worried about spreading it all around and messing up the not burned areas. There are some areas where you can still see the orangey color of the gel and like some of the paint strokes, so maybe it didn't burn fully in those areas. Also, it warped the wood, and I didn't even know that that was a thing that could possibly happen. I have a weird idea to try and get rid of some of this loose, sooty stuff. I'm gonna lint roll it. Don't judge me because I have no idea what I'm doing, but it makes sense in my head. And see, there was a ton of loose yuck on there. I still want to sand it. I'm gonna do it. Science. It's for science. Take one last look and enjoy because this is probably gonna get worse. Why is it so brown? I'm not even going to try to wipe this down. I'm just going to go wash it in the sink. This is what it looks like dry the next day. It did smudge onto and darken the non-burned spots. You can definitely tell the difference when you compare it to the sides and the back. So I guess if you want it to stay light, then don't sand it afterwards. But I liked the burned areas better without that skin condition, and it's a lot smoother now. And you can see some of the grain through it now, which I actually kind of like. Next, I'm going to try using this wood panel. It actually might be a tray or a frame, but I'm going to do this side and see what happens. I sanded it and wiped it down, and I'm going to test out the Scorch pen because I want to see how detailed I can actually get with it, since I already know that I can get really detailed with the gel. I'm just tracing out some concentric circles because I decided to do a mandala. I figured that those usually have a lot of detail to them, like lots of lines and dots and little swirlies, but I thought it would be easier and faster to draw than something else because it's the same elements over and over, and I already have the circles to follow. I was wrong. I apologize to all of you mandala artists. I seriously underestimated you. Mine is barely visible, and I can already tell it looks like absolute butt. But I don't feel like starting over, so what the heck. I was afraid that the wood would burn really easily because it's thin and pretty light colored, so I started with the lowest setting, but after like 9 minutes of nothing happening, I had to switch to the highest setting. Burning this was super frustrating. I'm trying to be patient, but it's taking forever. I can't seem to get an even burn, and if I try to even it out, I end up darkening the wood around the design. And my terrible drawing is just becoming more and more obvious. About halfway through this, I didn't even want to finish burning it, but I did, for you and for science. But yeah, I hate this. It took forever. It still discolored the wood. It's uneven. The center is really black. The outside is lighter. The design is absolute poop. You can see where I messed up and where certain loops are longer. Boo. I'm just gonna add this to my bin of stuff that I've messed up, and I'll fix it someday. I thought I was done here, but I really, really, really wanted to create at least one thing that I liked. So I watched a ton of videos for tips and tricks on how to do this. Most videos make it look so easy, like bing, bang, boom. But I did learn a couple of things. Apparently, I need to be even more patient and really focus on keeping the heat moving so that the wood warms up first before the chemical reaction takes place. I also need to keep the gun a little farther away from the wood, like 2 inches. So I'm going to try that on these little wooden rounds, and I'm going to use stencils to try and guarantee that the drawing doesn't look crappy. On this first one with the Scorch pen, I followed all of those tips, but after about 13 minutes, it wasn't getting any darker, so I gave up on that part. I think it looks okay overall. The stenciling isn't great, but the burn is evenly colored, even if it's not as dark as I'd like. So I'll call that mostly successful. With the gel already going in, the stencil is kind of a mess. But it wasn't really made for this, and the face still looks good, so I'm fine with it. After burning it, it warped the wood a little, which didn't happen on the other one, so that's weird. And there's some dark spots that look like they might be from the gel getting under the stencil. I don't really see too much discoloration, but it wasn't a particularly evenly colored burn. Jury's out on this one. You might have noticed that I made 2 other stenciled wood rounds, and that's because I want to try one last thing that I saw. Apparently, you can also heat this stuff in other ways. You can use a heat press or a torch, neither of which I have, but you can also heat them in the oven. So I'm going to try it in my little craft toaster oven to see how well that works. I preheat the oven to 350 degrees and bake them for 10 minutes. That's what the instructions said, and I didn't want to go any longer because there was like smoke coming out of the oven, and even though I was watching it the whole time and ventilating everything, I still wasn't brave enough to test it for any longer than that. So the gel one obviously has some burning around the edges, but I'm not sure why. It's mostly around where the stenciled picture is, so maybe it has to do with the chemicals in the burn paste. The one I did with the pen didn't get as dark as I wanted, again, but it's more even and it didn't burn any of the wood around the edge. But it did warp more than the other one. Really have no clue. So here's everything that I made. I don't know, guys. I really wanted to like this. I was really excited for it. But I feel like, I don't know, maybe wood burning is just not for me. What do you guys think? Any tips? Ideas? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.